folks, listen to these well-known cliches about the grief that people suffer over the loss of a loved one. First, time heals all wounds. Or this, he's with the angels now. Or this, she's in a better place. Still yet, how about this? At least you have other children. Or finally, you should be over it by now. They're all well-known cliches, aren't they? Each one a well-known cliche used by well-intentioned people to inspire renewed wellness in people. And yet each one is what I call a killer cliche that often does more harm than good. Right now, I could ask if any of you is still feeling the pain, the isolation, or the loneliness as the result of a death of a loved one 20 or more years ago. And you know, with a crowd this size, even this size, I would see a show of hands, because there are always hands raised in response to that question. But those raised hands would then beg the question, if time is going to heal all wounds, then does that mean 20 years is still not enough? And in addressing one of the other cliches, if my grief should be over by now, but it's not, does that mean I'm somehow defective or deficient because I haven't recovered yet? All of them. Well-known, well-intended, killer cliches, used in an attempt to alleviate pain, but apt to do more harm than good. In our reading this morning from the book of Jeremiah, we sense that the Jews are feeling, or what they're feeling, is joy as they're returning from the exile, the Babylonian captivity. We see them walking on straight, level roads, never stumbling, laughing and joking with every step. We see them walking along streams of pure water, reaching down with a cupped hand from time to time to scoop some water and quench their thirst. We see them singing back on Mount Zion, delighted with God's gifts of grain and wine and olive oil, sheep and cattle. Apparently, this band of tattered souls now has everything it needs. God has comforted them. God has turned their mourning into joy, their sorrow into gladness. And in reading this passage, we can rejoice with this tattered and torn remnant of Jewish exiles, limping its way back to Jerusalem. We join them in thanking God that no longer must they endure the brutality of slavery, the stinging lashes, the savage rapes, the humiliations and degradations, the screams of children being ripped from their parents' arms to be sold on the auction block like cattle. But no matter how joyous they may feel now, this bright, sunny day as they make their way home, these former exiles will slip back from time to time into their own private, hellish world of pain. having been spiritually battered and bruised, they will now and again begin to cry. So whatever we do, please, let us not whisper in their ears that time heals all wounds. Let us not remind these Jewish exiles that at least they have other children. Let us not say to them a month, a year, or even 20 years from now that they ought to be over their ordeal. For how long does it take to rebuild trust after rape? How long does it take to find so-called closure after losing your child, your husband, or your wife? How long does it take to heal from the sting and degradation of the lash? Instead, for now, just for now, let us simply join with them in praising God for being faithful to His people. Let us purposely walk with these Jews, who for at least this moment can laugh and joke and maybe rejoin life. Let us drink with them the pure living water. Let us delight with them in the grain and the wine and the oil of God's salvation. Let us be present to them. Let us give them our full attention. Let us love them and pray for their continued well-being. Let us rejoice with them, singing loudly their songs of joy. Of course, we might sing even louder if God were to bring us out of the depth of our own despair. Because there are those among us today here in this sanctuary who do not feel like singing, who cannot taste the living water or the grain or the wine or the oil. For them, there's pain. The bone-chilling, life-draining pain that seems to drag the soul to the farthest depths of the deepest ocean, where darkness lives, where the light has never shone. And perhaps, like the Jewish exiles long ago, these people are grieving the loss of a child, or a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a wife, a husband. Still others are suffering the loss of a job, or a marriage, or a battle with addiction. Still others may be experiencing the loss of health or mobility. And the questions they are asking are such as these. How do I return to the ocean's surface and to a life I want to live? A realigned life, perhaps, but a life worthwhile nonetheless. How might I lift my damaged and drenched sail so that I might chart a new and different course with my boat? How long must I wait to feel God's wind at my back? Isn't it interesting that we've all been educated on how to acquire things? We've been taught how to get an education, how to get a job, how to buy a house, etc., etc. You can take courses in virtually anything you want today, anything that might interest you. But what education do we receive about dealing with loss? What school do we go to in order to learn to deal with the conflicted feelings caused by loss? Where do we go? And when you think about it, loss is so much more predictable and inevitable than gain. And yet we are woefully ill-prepared to deal with loss. To make matters worse, society teaches us, and we succumb to this, we succumb to all those killer cliches about loss that I spoke about. Anne Brown, she writes this story about a loss she once suffered. It was 1985. I was 18, and I was to be away from home all summer. I had landed my first real job, a maid at the biggest hotel in Glacier National Park. One of the first people I met was a young man of 19 with orange hair and a passion for hiking that almost equaled his passion for God. We hit it off immediately. Rain or shine, we explored the park's trails. In addition to his incredible sense of adventure, I also admired a spiritual maturity I had never before encountered in someone that age. June 10th, my third day off. The plan was Iceberg Lake for sure, and then Ptarmigan Lake and Tunnel if we had time. 16 miles in all if we made it. Along the first 3-mile stretch of trail, one of the things we spoke about was how amazing it would be to stand on a ledge below an overhanging waterfall and watch the water cascade in front of us. And then, there it was, just around the bend. 200-foot Ptarmigan Falls with such a perfect ledge about 2/3 of the way down. We agreed that he would check it out first, while I waited on top for his report. 20 minutes and several snacks later, I began to wonder what was keeping him. I traced back and forth over a 1/4-mile section of trail that made a U-turn around the brim of the falls. But it was heavily wooded, and I had a difficult time seeing much of anything in the canyon below. And about the 3rd time, retracing my steps, I finally spotted what I had begun to dread seeing. A pair of boots sticking out on a rock and connected to a half-submerged body, a full head of orange hair flowing with the current. I knew immediately that he was dead. After a few moments of tears and shock, I gathered up packs and belongings and began the hike back to the ranger station to report the incident. How do you begin to tell someone a story like that? But be as it were, after telling my story, I made the trek back up to the falls with 5 rangers in rescue gear and a chopper on standby. It wasn't until 3 hours later, when I finally returned to the hotel, the news having preceded me, that I broke down and collapsed into the waiting arms of my 2 tearful roommates. Already the next morning, I received calls from people in my home church saying that they were praying for me. Amazingly, the news had gone out over the radio before I even had a chance to call home. And over the next few weeks, I encountered some of the greatest acts of kindness from fellow employees, including back rubs, special dinners, and the offer of extra time off. But the story doesn't end there. Something was still missing. I finally decided that I needed to share with his parents how much I missed him. I got their address, included some pictures I'd taken of the falls and the so-called rescue, and wrote a lengthy letter describing their son as the incredibly spiritual person I knew. Several weeks passed when I received a return letter that just floored me. His mom wrote that she had wrestled and wrestled and wrestled with God over the death of her son, and just couldn't come to terms with the idea that this being really, truly God's will. She finally laid out a fleece, so to speak, and asked God for 10 signs. The first, she writes, occurred the very next day as they were visiting the gravesite. The shadow of a cross appeared on the hood of their car. She went on to list 8 more things that came about during the next few weeks. Number 10 was my letter, and it served to answer her most crucial question. Their family had since been overwhelmed with a feeling of acceptance and peace. It still amazes me when I think about it. We ask God for signs, or we interpret various events as God speaking to us in signs. But never before had I considered the possibility that God could use me as a sign to someone else. And maybe, just maybe, it is just that which gives our lives its ultimate and fulfilling purpose. I suggest that in this great cause and effect world of ours, in this intricately woven web of love and pain and circumstance, God turns evil into good, pain into peace, despair into new life worth living. But God chooses to do so through us. Through us. It is God who reminds us that the morning does come with the dawn. And the other morning ends with the coming dawn. Not quickly or smoothly, not all of a sudden, but usually slowly. At times, very slowly. One small crack of light at a time. And so God calls us to travel with those who are suffering. And through us turns that evil into good, that pain into peace, and that despair into new life. And faith tells me that it is through prayer that we secure ourselves somehow within this holy web of God's love. And it is there that we gain the strength and the wherewithal to assist those who are suffering. And so if you do have a friend who is suffering, and you wish to comfort him or her, then I urge you to begin by praying. Pray not to deliver killer cliches or other vain, empty promises. Rather, pray for the strength and the wherewithal to be truly present to your friend. Don't try to anticipate time, because recovery is very individual and there is no absolute time frame. Really, there's no getting over a child who has died any more than one ever forgets a parent or a loved one. There's only learning to live within the confines of a new relationship, one based in the memories of love given and received. So as you travel with your friend, trust in your listening ear. Trust the warmth of a gentle hug or the simple touch of a hand. In God's strength, help to direct your friend to the small glimpses of dawn's early light. Write letters. Cook meals. Wash his truck. Comb her hair. Babysit his kids. Maybe take her into town shopping. Look for concrete ways to help your friend mend her sail. Find ways to take him outside his world of pain and feel even the slightest of breeze. Help your friend to grieve. Help her to complete the relationships that have ended or changed. Help him to keep fond memories from turning painful, so that with each step, with each ray of hope, he will begin to heal. A laugh here, a joke there, a sip now and then from the brook of God's living water, a morsel of grain, a taste of wine, a spoonful of oil from time to time, until he begins to see for himself dawn's early light and is able to take hold of the rudder, raise the sail, and set off, however feebly, for his new and promising land.